Good day, podcast community, high performing, high performance podcast community. We're actually in our local studio. Jonathan is in his local studio, and I'm in mine. So we're more local than we are seniors, which we do a lot of podcasts. And so, Jonathan, welcome again to as we untangle how do we help businesses grow, what part of fractional executive can help them grow. And we want to first have you introduce yourself, who you are, what you do, and who you serve, and then we'll get into our podcast.
Excellent. My name is Jonathan Tremblay. I'm the owner and founder of Pivotal Exec Solutions, where we match you up with your appropriate fractional executive to help your business. Me personally, I am a tech and an operational empowerment coach. And so I come in and I help businesses understand their technology, understand how to set up the proper processes and operations to work, 300 to 400% more effectively.
Yeah, every time I hear that, it just kind of gets me crazy excited. I don't know if you read this book, but Harry Dent, who's the great boom ahead, and this was 20 years ago, and he talked about a time when technology is going to be so chaotic that we're making shifts in how everything we do. Now we have AI, we've got all these different things coming on. For a business owner, it's overwhelming when you think of the the ability to learn and apply to your business. I like when we initially started talking about the fractional executive concept that you're able to see in your work all kinds of different scenarios and what they're using to get an effective return on whatever they're investing in. What would you explain to our viewers, like when you're sitting at that seat and you see all these technologies, how are you applying it to your clients?
Yeah, 100%. Well, like you mentioned, right? I think one of the most common terms is Moore's Law, right? Which is the actual theory that technology doubles at the pace at which it develops. And every single time you have a compounding impact of how fast it takes for technology to develop itself. We're now at a time where we're having a technological revolution every 10 years. I mean, it's crazy to think about that. Like, our cell phones are no more than 20 years old, right? They, back in the early 2000s, weren't even a thing the way that we understand them today, the smartphone and everything else,
Mhm.
right? And now AI is just changing the game. AI is going to accelerate the speed at which technology comes out and at the speed of which solutions become available to businesses and to people. And so now we're getting more into a situation of just like information overload, right? There's just so many different technologies out there that it's very difficult for people to understand what can I do and what is beneficial to me, right? And so to your point, I get to work with hundreds of different clients at any given moment. Honestly, sometimes I come in, and most of the time we're being brought in to fix a solution, to fix a problem that the business currently has. But that doesn't mean that businesses don't have good things in their businesses, even though they have a problem. So oftentimes I'm coming in and I'm looking at how to fix that individual problem. And as I'm talking to them about other things that they have going on in the business, I'm like, huh, that's actually a really good idea. Like, I like the way that you put together that solution and that technology in your business. And then that gives me ideas for 5 other clients that I have, and I can go back and essentially provide that value. One of the things that I tell people is like, I don't necessarily believe that I'm smarter, right, than anybody else. The reason that I understand technology and how operations work is because it's my obsession and it's what I'm passionate about. And because of that, all I do all day long is just look at these things and, think about how businesses operate and how they run smoother and things of that nature. So it's just a matter of experience, and it's a matter of just being exposed to that world on a consistent basis. And that gives me a unique advantage to provide to clients.
Yeah, I love that. And I what I like about what you just said, and I want our viewers to kind of sink in. If you're multitasking right now, let's single task. Let's really start thinking, because the amount of distraction that's out there, digital distraction, the amount of things that are being we're getting on a daily basis doesn't give us the ability to think like we did before the iPhone came out. Now, if you've got an extra 10 minutes or 5 minutes or 1 minute, you see people jump on their phone and they start scrolling. And I heard somebody say, be careful if you're just a consumer of content, meaning you watch TV 4 hours a day, which I think is the average. You consume 2 hours of scrolling on your phone, which doesn't allow you to think things through. So, what would you say to? I like what you said. You sit in a position where you're solving problems for businesses, and I always heard the bigger the problem you solve, the bigger the opportunity. Like when you're working with clients, they're coming with a problem, and then how are you solving that? Are you just having them go through a session with you? Walk us through what that looks like and how you apply that to a client that comes to you with a big problem.
100%, 100%. So, optimizing processes and optimizing different operations is essentially the same for almost every single business, right? It's a reality. It's like we understand there's almost this unique dichotomy that you must understand, which is every business is almost exactly the same, but every business is not the same at the same time, right? And those two things exist
Mhm.
in the same space at the same time, ironically, right? Because processes are processes are processes, and the way that a business stays alive is getting customers, providing either a service or a product, and generating and actually collecting income, right? At the end of the day, it's those three basic steps. Well, in the same way, we have a methodology that we utilize, right? And we essentially have to identify clear objectives, right? And clear is an acronym for essentially a methodology that we utilize here at Gretrix, at Pivotal Exec Solutions, that allows us to um, do optimization of any business, essentially, right? And clear stands for like clarify. You have to clarify your objectives.
Mhm.
Leverage, which is use emotional insights and understand what metrics and what goals are truly really driven by your emotional drive that you have.
Mhm.
Evaluate and assess current strategies and emotional alignment. In other words, just making sure. Again, I think like one of the big challenges is like business owners oftentimes think about their objectives as, well, I want to make $1 million. Well, no one wants to make $1 million. I mean, don't get me wrong, there's always those that have this obsession over money, but the fact of the matter is most business owners, in my personal opinion, have a desire to make money in order to achieve a particular goal, right? I want more financial freedom. I want to be able to control my own time. I want to deliver X solution in X style because I'm passionate about delivering that solution, right? And so being clear about your objectives is essentially all about making sure that we're identifying the real true objectives versus the metrics we tell ourselves and things like that. And then from there, we identify what we call gaps, right? And the gaps then essentially kind of gives us the actual metrics and the numbers that allow us to essentially identify what are the metrics that are associated with your true objectives. I want to have more free time. Okay, great. Well, how much time today is not free? Oh, well, I spend 10 hours a day today not doing what I want, right? And 1 hour a day doing what I actually want. Those are gaps, right? It's like you've got a gap between where you really want to be is, hey, I want to actually be to a point that I'm only working 3 hours a day and spending, 8 hours on what I want to do and what I'm passionate about. And so once we get into that and we identify essentially kind of where your targets are for your business and where you're trying to get to, then we can really hone in on essentially where is now your constraint, right? And I've spoken about the goal, on your podcast before, which is a book that essentially explains the theory of constraints. And what ends up happening is, again, right, within any particular process, if you assume there are 6 steps to a process, there is always a bottleneck somewhere in there, right?
Mhm.
And it doesn't matter. You can turn around and work on the last step and optimize the last step and make sure that it's amazing. But if your constraint is in the middle of your steps, you're going to get into a situation that it doesn't matter what you do at the end, you're not getting enough throughput anyway, right? So it's understanding where to dedicate your time. We've talked about that as well as, and this is where I talk about working smart and working fast, right? Which are also acronyms to the steps of basically what goes into turning around and making sure that when we are looking at processes and trying to make sure that all this is effective, that we're working intelligently on the actual thing that needs to be worked on, and then getting to that quickly and not diddly dallying or doing productive procrastination, right?
Mhm.
Which is a lot of what happens. And so with the Pivotal Exec program, we reduce a lot of that productive procrastination while in the process of identifying your goals and going from
You know, I like how you explain that. As you were explaining, I'm thinking, okay, you're an orchestra leader, and in the orchestra pit, there are all the people playing the different instruments. What happens if one instrument is out of tune and just is not playing? Then the whole thing is messed up. It's like that'll immediately, it's like that bottleneck becomes the problem for the whole. Even though 100 people are playing the right stuff, one person's off and it's everything's messed up. And it's kind of like business. You could have a good product, you could have all the processes right, but one thing, your technology is messed up, and so you're spending an inordinate amount of time trying to work around, solve it, and you're not equipped to it because that's not your forte. And I did that my whole life, or like not whole life, but ever since technology, I had to work around for everything because it was a bottleneck that I just embraced as just a workaround. But once you streamline my business, it's like now the orchestra is all playing the same music. And it's beautiful to hear when everything is just because you just appreciate when you go to a concert and everything is just so good because everybody is playing the right. And that orchestra leader is just up there. So I see you as an orchestra leader, and in the pit, there's more than just one person not playing. In business and technology, it's about 5 or 6. So the bottlenecks are substantial. How do people, my question is, it makes sense to me because it was such a pain point for me. What are businesses like? They're coming to you, are they knowing where their pain point is, or are they, like, just saying, "I need to do something. What can you do to help me?" 'Cause what we don't know, we don't know. So, kind of share with our viewers, like, what does that look like?
there. Yeah, 100%. I think, as we talked about before, right? A large part of this process, the very first step of this process, is for me to really get a true understanding of what your objectives are,
Mhm.
right? And part of the reason that we do that process is because oftentimes, most of my clients come to me with like, Jonathan, I'm stressed out. I don't know what's going on with my business. It's falling apart. I've
Yeah.
had clients literally like bawling their eyes out while telling me how frustrated and how upset they feel about the current status of their business, and the
Mhm.
fact that they just can't seem to wrap their head around why their business is struggling so much and why everything is so difficult. They're like, why does business have to be so hard? Right?
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, the reality is it doesn't. But again, you don't know what you don't know, right?
Yeah.
And again, I mean, it's think of the craziness of you have a screw and a screwdriver, right? Well, to us, it's all very commonsensical, and we're like, yeah, it makes sense to do that. But if you took that technology to a caveman who has never experienced, or to an indigenous person in a third world country or whatever, they're not going to understand what that is, and it's going to be overwhelming. And if you are expecting them to get that screw through a piece of wood, it's going to be very difficult, right? And again, right, like, I mean, imagine just our cell phones. Can you imagine taking our cell phones 100 years into the past and just dropping it there? People would have no clue. They would think it was the devil, right? I mean, there have been so many instances where civilizations have done the craziest things, right? Because they didn't understand it and it was overwhelming. It's just a part of who we are as human beings, and that is okay. Now, you because you don't have the experience, you don't know what you don't know. It's kind of like when your car like starts making weird noises and you're like, I don't know what's going on, but like all of a sudden now my engine's going clunk 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 clunk, and you're like, why is it doing that? You don't know what's going on. If you come in and you're trying to just swap out different parts and you're trying to diagnose the thing all on your own, you're going to be in a world of hurt, right? You need someone that you can trust, somebody that can come to you and give you the right advice and give you the right direction around what's going on and a clear understanding, right? And it's the same thing, right? Oftentimes, like business owners will turn around and hire web developers or hire, people who claim to have different skills. And oftentimes they do have the skill, I will say, right? But it's very different to understand how a skill works to actually understanding the intricacies of your actual business and how it all operates. So in the same analogy with the car, if you turn around and go to any mechanic on the planet, or you got your neighbor who says he can work on cars, right? Like, you don't know the level of quality, you don't know what's going to happen, and that's when you get into situations where either you're overcharged for a solution that shouldn't have cost as much because you don't know what to trust. You turn around and you get services that are below standard and below quality, and you're just visiting the mechanic over and over and over because you're not going to a reputable source, right? And again, what's the difference between when you go to a mechanic that is from a reputable, accredited mechanic? It's a lot more expensive. You'll pay $2,000 for something that your neighbor will do for $500, right? There is a price difference. And well, why don't we get all of our work from our neighbors, right? There are
Yeah.
plenty of people who could. We go to accredited sources to get that information that we can trust, that they're not overcharging us, that they're not taking advantage of us, and that they're doing quality work. Well,
Mhm.
that's essentially the same equivalent of you turning around and choosing to work with, that $5 developer from India who can do web development, but is not going to be taking into consideration your business, your operations, and all these different things. That's what executives do, and they give you that guaranteed quality in that process.
Hmm. Yeah, the I like what you said, trust, because Stephen Covey's son, I think I don't remember his name. He said that business is the speed of trust, and so we're moving very fast. AI can get a little bit crazy because somebody say, "Oh, was that an AI generated image or was that Jonathan?" And so you have to trust the people you're doing business with, and that's one of the things that is so important because you do what you don't want to just roll the dice with your company. You have to your experience with working with big companies gave you the mindset to be able to put together the company that solves problems like nobody else solves. It's like they come to you and it's like, "Hey, Jonathan, this is my problem." And you're basically just through the processes, through understanding technology, making that company. I mean, you look at Blockbuster versus Netflix. One's around, one's not. What's the difference? One changed, one did not. And both, I mean, how many stores were there at one time? But if you don't change and recognize that if you're not going to take advantage of getting rid of the bottlenecks, the guy that has the business that's similar to you, he does or she does, they're going to fly by you like you're standing still. What do you say when as we wind down and as we get to the technology, are you saying that at 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 Pivotal Executive, there's a, oops, we lost Jonathan. Now he's back. There he is. There. Oops.
I don't
No, I cut him out.
I don't know what happened with
That's
Like,
got to be Russians, either that or
yeah,
Chinese. I don't know. One of those two. I was talking to somebody and his calls were being dropped. I'm saying, hey, look, somebody is hacking our phones.
right, right,
It can't be a nice US person. It's got to be those nasty people overseas.
right.
Just kidding, of course. But okay. So my question was really, Jonathan,
Yeah,
is that the critical nature of speed of business when you start solving problems, what what is the reaction as the bottlenecks get, you know, worked out, the time, because we all have 24 hours.
mhm.
Elon Musk, he's spending his time different than us, and he's getting a lot done. I want you to kind of put yourself in the shoes of a business owner. What's that look like when all of a sudden things are clicking for you and that bottleneck that you've been putting up with for a year now runs smoothly and your processes are run smoothly? Give us a little peek into the future of somebody that implements the fractional executive or the 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 pivotal executive concept.
Yeah, 100%. So yeah, I think again, right, like I talked about earlier, it's there's a reason that we all have the same 24 hours in the day. We all have the same abilities. A lot of people think that, oh, some people are more talented, some people are more intelligent. Again, I don't personally consider myself to be that intelligent, and I don't personally believe that I have that many talents over most people, right? But what I have learned, at least that what I feel like has made me successful, is the fact that I have learned how to dedicate my time to the right thing, right? Which goes back to that theory of constraints. I genuinely believe that one of the big challenges, and I get stuck a lot too, right? With my own businesses, and as I try to grow myself and grow my business, I get stuck on different things. And I always know I'm stuck on something because I have some version of a belief that my problem is really over here, or I'm avoiding trying to work on the actual problem because that problem is something that I'm not good at, something that I
Mhm.
emotionally am struggling to essentially get through. And so I focused on the wrong things. And it's not, and I will tell you, you can spend 6 months working on a problem, but if it's not the right problem, it's not going to solve the core issue that you're actually facing. And
Yeah.
so oftentimes really what happens throughout our with our clients is we help guide people emotionally and psychologically through the decisions they're making for their business, and trying to get them to see, hey, like, I understand you've got this process, you think that your problem's here, but really your problem's over here, and I need you to just kind of like shift that attention and get you to the right place. And that's kind of what we specialize in, is having those conversations with clients and essentially going through the explanations of how the business works and understanding exactly what goes in the ins and outs of their business to get them to see, oh, the problem's really over here. And once they take that same energy that they were dedicating somewhere else for 6 months and point it to the right place, within 6 days, the problem is improved drastically, right? And even as I go through my own challenges through my business, that's what happens. I get stuck and I'm trying to work on different things until I realize, well, why is the problem really happening? Where's the real true source of the issue? And once I identify that and I start working on it, within like days to weeks, I'm seeing drastic changes and results in that area. But and then I turn around and I always kick myself in the butt because I'm like, I know this is how it works. But you can't really understand, right? Especially even like, when you're looking inwards, there's a biblical saying, right, that says that it's easier to see the twig in your neighbor's eye than it is to see the log in your own. And I've always found it interesting because I think people see that as a criticism, right? Like, people are just very judgmental of others. I
Mhm.
don't personally interpret it that way. I interpret it as a statement of fact, right? That's just the way that our perception works. That's the way that our psychology works. And there's nothing wrong with you because you could see the twig in your neighbor's eye. I actually think that God made it that way intentionally to bring us together. It means that I can't see my problems. I need somebody else to come in and look at
Yeah.
them.
Well, You just dropped a gold nugget on us, Jonathan. And with that gold nugget, I want to challenge our viewers that if you know of somebody that you hear it in conversations, man, if I could have somebody to solve this, I'd be whistling Dixie. Whatever it is, tell them about Jonathan. Tell them, share this video with them, share this podcast with them. You know, if you personally look at your business, are there some things in your business because technology, unless you're a whiz bang and you're 25 years old and you specialize in it, you're not going to see these problems in your business because you're good at doing certain things. And technology is changing so rapidly. You don't need to be an expert, but you need to know who to call. And I want to challenge our viewers to make that phone call. Jonathan, give us our information for our Spotify listeners.
Yeah, absolutely. So, again, I'm Jonathan Tremblay. You can reach me at 404-374-9322. And you can email me at any time, jt at Pivotal Exec Solutions. That's PIVOTAL, exec, EXEC .solutions.
Awesome. Well, we're going to put a podcasterpetecane.com and the phone number 404-428-3006. If you need a voice in the marketplace and you need to educate people and you need to have a different approach to really bringing your message to the marketplace, become a podcast guest on our show, especially if you are in senior living. But we also do local over here. We're actually broadcasting from Ridley Commercial Cleaning. So Ridley's a wonderful company that's been in business almost 50. I mean, he's been in business almost 50 years in a niche. You want professionals to take care of your needs. Get a hold of professionals. You don't have to look at a YouTube video and think you're a professional. That's not the way to do it. I can tell you, I tried to put a water system in after I watched a YouTube video. Well, I flooded the kitchen of the person. She wasn't too happy with me. So YouTube can give you some good advice, but don't bank on that stuff. There's so much information out there. Get a hold of a professional who can solve your problem when it comes to growing. Because if you're not going to grow fast, your competitors are going to fly by you. So be the person that's solving your problems, increasing your efficiencies, your processes in your business, and get a hold of Jonathan. So we want to thank you. Thanks for taking the time, Jonathan, to bring a valuable message to our viewers this morning. Any closing thoughts? What would be the one thing you'd want your viewers to take home from our podcast here today?
Just the biggest thing that I love to share with people is just understand that learning and growing is a part of the process. The fact that you don't have the answers doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with you, that you're failing as a person, or that you're failing as a business owner. The reality is that's just part of the process, and that I believe is genuinely how our world was built, to force us to seek each other out and to force us to leverage the strength of others, right? And so just think of it that way. And again, please, in everything you do, don't be afraid to ask for help.
I love it. Leveraging the strength of others. I want our viewers to take that home. Thank you so much, Jonathan, for sharing that with us today.